How's everybody doing tonight?
Awesome.
Well,
Let's speak for everybody.
welcome to our Wisconsin Revolution Assembly. I'm Steve Engel on the steering committee. Good to see everybody. I'm really excited to hear from our speaker tonight on talking to your legislator. I think that's an opportunity that we have that maybe other OWR folks across the state don't have as much opportunity. We're right, the capital's right here. So we can talk to all sorts of legislators if we want. So that'll be interesting because I've never talked to my legislator before, and it'll be fun. Anybody got any announcements they want to make before we jump right in? Yeah.
Tiger Woods won the Masters at age 43.
Tiger Woods won the Masters at age 43. He was like, he was down there. He wasn't anywhere near number one.
Oh, it's down there. He hadn't won any in 11 years.
Yeah. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
Mike's going to play us a song.
I just have my guitar along. All right. I'll give you guys a song to start with.
Thank you.
And this is a song about political organizing. Okay. And it's called Welcome the Day. Welcome the day we discover our power, rising up from the ground. We will welcome the day we seize the hour, stand up and say, welcome the day. You stand with me, I'll stand with you. Keep this land free and true. Welcome the day we discover our power, rising up from the ground. We will welcome the day we seize the power, stand up and say, welcome the day. With liberty and justice for all. Whether you're big or small, welcome the day we discover our power, rising up from the ground. We will welcome the day we seize the power, stand up and say, welcome the day. Together we can join hand in hand and reach all across this land. Welcome the day we discover our power, rising up from the ground. We will welcome the day we seize the hour, stand up and say, welcome the day. Stand up and say, welcome the day. Stand up and say, welcome the day. Nice to meet you again.
Thank you, Mike Bell. So we're going to do, I wanted to say, Shabnam Lofty, our steering committee, one of the chairs, co-chairs, she had a baby, was that yesterday or today?
Today.
Baby Eliana arrived today.
What's her name?
Eliana, girl. So I don't have any pictures yet. But congratulations, Chapman.
New member.
A new member. So thanks for everybody for coming tonight. Al, do you want to introduce our speaker? We're gonna have our speaker speak, and towards the end, we're gonna talk about what we might do with this newfound knowledge to actually put it into action and we talk to our legislators. Al?
Hi, everybody. I'm Al Seltzer. I guess I should stand somewhere. These cables are connected to stuff, so if you come up here, be careful. If any of you is in the witness protection program, we are filming this, so you may not want to get in front of the camera. No, just saying. We have a couple of representatives here. I'm not quite sure. Actually, we have a third person as well. We have Debbie Fairbanks from Drinking Liberally New Glarus and the school board, right? Representing them. With Karen McKim representing Karen McKim and all the wonderful things that she does. And we have two Kriegos. We have these two, Julie and Bob, representing Wisconsin Grassroots Network, which we are a member of along with everybody else. And they do a lot of good work as well. Anybody else here representing an outside group other than OWR? I didn't see any other people that signed up that are here.
Is there anybody from Indivisible here?
I don't see anybody if there is.
Okay.
Part of what we're trying to do, we'll be sponsoring, it's a joint effort between my organization, which is called Progressive Action Network, which is an internet service thing, and OWR, who are the actual sponsors, is to encourage groups to work together, to get to know each other better, spend some time, learn what they're about, and to be aware of each other's activities. One of the things that I spoke to Gary about, Gary Goike, our speaker this evening, is that too often one group will show up in the Capitol and they'll march into somebody's office and there'll be two of us. And we'll be saying, we hate you, which they don't usually, for whatever reason, respond well to that. I'm not sure what the problem is. But we aren't necessarily as well organized, and Gary's going to help us with that as well. What I'm trying to do, and it's kind of my mission, is to get these groups to coalesce around their issues, to show up together in a large group. If I walk in with 30 or 40 people from different groups, not just OWR members only, I think that has more of an impact than simply me walking in and saying, hey, Gary, I got a problem with something. More than that, which Gary has taught me, if I have my material to present in a way that that person can digest and use later, that's going to work that much better for me than simply walking in and giving them a 5-minute speech about what I think they ought to do. I'm saying this because I'm one of the guys that shows up and gives you a 5-minute speech about what I think you ought to do and leaves and knows that that's not going to happen. So we're doing a series of workshops. Our next one will be Chris Marion, who will be talking about the difference between the rural parts of Dane County and Greene County and so forth. And one of the things she's going to help us understand better is the difference when you're running for office and you're in a rural area as opposed to running for office in Madison. Then we're having Mike McCabe, who's going to talk to us about talking to people, among other things, and bridging the divide. And we haven't got a date scheduled yet, but we're going to have the ACLU folks come in and do a talk or workshop. These are all workshops. I keep calling them talks, they're workshops on incarceration, particularly talking about what's going on here in Madison and Dane County. They have a road show that they're going on the state with. I recently was privileged to be at the Joint Finance Committee meeting and see what happens when people come out in force. We had 191 speakers in Janesville in the middle of the day, standing in line forever. It was unbelievable. But people stayed, they said their piece. I know Steve was there, Debbie was there, and we all had different stories and we all had, to some degree, different issues. The AARP folks showed up like an army. They were magnificent. There's probably 30 of them just in a phalanx. And they entered the room. It was like, we're here. And I thought to myself, that's what we have to do. You have to show up like that and say, hey, here we are. WPN, the folks that sponsored mine, we all had green T-shirts that said Wisconsin Public Education Network on them. Oh, there's one over there.
Well, this is,
He's also, you did the ACLU People Not Prison, and he was also there. So I think what's important is for us to come out of this with a better understanding of how to present our ideas to legislators and how to make sure that that information sticks a little bit. I will say this to you, I've been told two things by people like Gary who are a whole lot smarter than I am. One is, if your representative doesn't realize you actually support them, they kind of wonder, right? I'm out here saying I want to do things, but my folks don't show up for me. So that's to go and talk to them and say, hey, we are behind you. And again, if you're a large group of people, that's much more impressive. And then the other side, if you just walk in by yourself to somebody who maybe doesn't agree with you, it's kind of like, well, yeah, but it's just you. In fact, I was livid yesterday when Nancy Pelosi announced that the progressive wing of the Democratic Party there was only 5 people. And the announcer even took her down on that. But unfortunately, that's to a degree the way politicians think. You walk in your office, there's 2 of you, and you're from Madison, and they're representing Green Bay, and it's like, oh yeah, whatever. Okay. So Gary is here to teach us how to do that better. The other thing I've repeated several times, I'll repeat it one more time, and we did a lot of work in JFC, Joint Finance Committee meeting, having a statement, having something to put in front of them, a personal story, an actual position, potentially legislation you would like to see them write into law. When you learn that most of the time they don't write their own legislation. So you're doing yourself a favor if you walk in and say, hey, here's what I think we ought to pass. So turn it over to the guy who knows what he's talking about. Gary, go ahead.
I have several handouts for you. So, Al, do you want me to speak from this podium for a recording?
It would be nice if you were generally around there.
Okay. Is this microphone?
Yeah, you can stick it out of there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If this works, can you hear me a little bit better?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good evening. About 20 minutes ago, I left the Inn on the Park Hotel now, the Premier Park Hotel, and I conducted a legislative day for a very interesting group called the Community Development Financial Institutions. There's a whole, I'm going to ask Julie if she can, before she gets the pizza, to pass one of these out for you. Just as background as to what we did today. They're different. They're different. And you can share if you're a couple. As she's doing that, let me acknowledge that one of my longtime friends that you are very familiar with is David Newby.
Yes.
So David Newby has gone through some illnesses, but he was obviously very active in the formation of some of the groups that are here. Tonight, he is better. He's had some health scares, but he used to lobby me. He was a teaching assistant and became president of the AFL-CIO. And this past Saturday, the Labor History Society honored him with distinguished service at the Labor Temple in Madison. Also acknowledge Susan, who I have worked with for many years. I'm very active in the public transportation area, and she has been a mentor to me and helped educate me, and I'm a big supporter of the cause that they are involved in. I just wanted to let you know that David and Susan are good. One of my friends is Roe Parker, who's out in Oregon. He was going to make a special trip in tonight, but when I was in the legislature, he was the county board supervisor in Winnebago County, a real character back then, I want you all to know, so he hasn't changed much. And also I know that when I was invited to speak here, that there was a little debate over my credentials and my background. And I apologize to those of you who may have been offended by some past things that I have been involved with as a lobbyist many years ago. And I want you to know that all of us in life, it isn't when you fall down, it's when you get back up that proves what you're all about. Lobbying is a very hazardous occupation, trust me. And oftentimes it isn't the lobbyist who is offering, it is the legislator who is asking. And so there are difficult situations that you have to confront. So you live with those and you move forward. But Al was very gracious to explain to me a little bit, and I'm thankful that you had me come tonight. I was born and raised in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. That's my hometown. I went to a Catholic grade school and a Catholic high school. Catholic high school I went to in Oshkosh still exists. It's called Lourdes Academy. Lourdes Academy was operated by the Christian Brothers, who are not priests. They're noted for making brandies. Those of you who have a brandy in 7 will know that the best brandy you can buy is Christian Brothers brandy. At least that's my opinion. What they taught, this is 1965, 1964. What my teacher, who was a religious man by the name of Brother Dennis, taught me was to respect our book, our textbook that we had called The Common Good. It talked about our responsibilities as a person of faith to do certain things. And so in the 60s, a group of our high school kids went to hear Martin Luther King in Washington, D.C. give his speech. And a lot of that, what happened in those days, really entered into the civil rights movement, quite honestly, the anti-war movement, and a lot of other things. When the conservative movements began to realize that that end of faith was moving people to action, that yes, people believed in these things, they began to counter-organize within the churches, and all of a sudden abortion became the defining issue. So if you were Newt Gingrich, who hated all these things, you became the strongest person against abortion in the United States. And they were able cleverly to switch the issues. I mention that because it gives you an idea of a person's background and why you run for office. So I graduated, I went to Minnesota, and in 1970, I had graduated from college, and I was hired by Hubert Humphrey, the original. So some of you here will know that Humphrey was vice president until 1968. He lost to Richard Nixon. Between 1969 and 1970, he became a professor at Macalester College in Minnesota, and he worked for the Encyclopedia Britannica. He wrote stories for them. And those of you who have your images of Hubert Humphrey know that he was verbose. He was quite a talker. And I had the chance as a college graduate to go and work in his office in Washington, D.C. from 1970 to 1973, when he became a U.S. Senator again. And I tell people in Minnesota, no, it was the original Hubert Humphrey, not the Attorney General one, or not the son that didn't do so well one, but it was the original. And that motivated me to come back to Oshkosh and to run for office. So in 1974, I put my name on the ballot. I was single. I lived in my parents' basement. And I put my name on the ballot, and I did not go to every fourth door. I went to every door in the district. And in 1974, I was elected to the state senate, being the first progressive Democrat to be elected in 117 years from that district. And it was in 1974 that you mentioned Chris Marion, and you mentioned that, say that name, you think of Nate Tim, and a whole bunch of people in southwestern Wisconsin. The first woman was elected to the state senate in 1974. There was no women's bathroom in the state capitol on the floor where the senators were. They had to cut the men's bathroom in half. This is 1974. She was a professor at Platteville and got elected to the Senate. We became a team. She worked on a lot of the issues to deal with farmland preservation, I worked on a lot of issues with education. I'm not an educator, but I chaired the Committee on Education for 8 years and did a lot of work with the university and the school districts. So I come to you today with some messages, and one of those is that this program I worked on today gives you an example of the literature we prepared for what the United States Department of Treasury created a program called Community Development Financial Institutions. So the Hmong Chamber of Commerce is one of these agencies. The Native American Chamber of Commerce is one of these industries. These are ways to funnel economic assistance to people who are unbanked or have very few resources for banking. So we brought together a whole group of people. We were in the governor's office for an hour. We sat down with them over the lunch hour. We had a press conference, and we didn't have, like, our press conference couldn't start with 2 murdered on Broadway and the Beltline. We couldn't start with anything that bled. And so we didn't get we knew that we weren't going to get a big press response to a news conference talking about these issues, because it wasn't, if it bleeds, it leads. And about 12:30, I wanted to send out an email that said in the press room, the Mueller report will be released at 1 o'clock here, come get your copy. And I knew we'd fill the place if that were the case, and that's what we should. So I want to focus tonight. I do have kind of a lengthy handout. I prepared for this, and I'm going to hand this out to you. It has all of my contact information on where I live and so forth. So I was reapportioned out of the district, and I became a lobbyist purely by accident. I was contacted by a person in Milwaukee. I drove down to Milwaukee. They said, "What are you going to do?" I was merged with Scott McCallum, who was a state senator. So Fond du Lac and Oshkosh, right where our house was in a different district. And so I had to think of what I was going to do. And this person said, "Well, you'd be great at doing this." And they asked me, "So how much are you going to charge?" And this was a position working on credit union type legislation. And I said, "Well, my fee for the year would be $19,000. And that was the salary of a state senator in 1983, was $19,000. So I called my wife and I said, "Well, I have work at the same rate I'm being paid, so we'll be okay." And she says, "I am going to Theda Clark Hospital because our second child was being born. Our second son is Evan Gordon, who's a state representative from the city of Milwaukee now. And so he was born up in Oshkosh." This is all background for you. And so I became a lobbyist at that time. I have to tell you, I enjoy what I do tremendously. I value, I understand the role that you can play when you choose to do things the right way and you choose who you want to work for. So I've had a lot of offers over the years to work for a big pharmaceutical company. One of them was a real ripoff. The second one I chose to work for was called Pfizer Company, Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. Pfizer Pharmaceuticals issue had nothing to do with the cost of healthcare. Pfizer used the stomachs of Wisconsin dairy cows to produce a coating gel for some of their pills that they manufactured, that it dissolved quickly and it was the right color. And it was a very, very interesting small endeavor, but you can choose what you want to work for, what you don't want to work for in this capacity. And so the example that I passed out today is when these folks call, "This is what I want to do, this is what I want to be involved in." And I think it's very important that you learn some of the tricks of the trade. The conservatives have learned one thing in the last few years. They've learned to focus. So they focused on controlling the legislative process. They've learned to say, if you redistrict things in a way that benefits your point of view, you can win. If you prevent people from voting, that you know where they're gonna vote, you win. So this has been, they have been incredibly strategic in how they spend their money, how they want to prevent things from happening, whether it's campaign finance laws, if it's reapportionment, all these are issues you work on. These are not accidents. They are part of a very deliberate, funded plan to change how we operate as a democracy, how we operate in Wisconsin. So I'm going to ask to pass out this. Did everybody get one? Everybody got one? Okay. So first of all, open up to page 1. There is a psychotherapist and a philosopher by the name of Nathaniel Branden, and he relates happiness in life to your self-esteem. And self-esteem is related to self-efficacy. And he defines self-efficacy is feeling that one is competent to deal with life's basic challenges. Self-efficacy leads to a sense of control over one's life. Webster's definitions, the power of producing effects, the power to produce the desired result. That's how I view lobbying, is empowering people to not feel not sufficient because they don't know the process. In the last year, I had 2 legislators, Mr. Dan Fields. Good to see you. In the last year, I have had 2 legislators, ask me to critique how they are operating in the legislature. And I said, well, do you want to have a drink first? Do you want to have do shots somewhere? Do you want to, how free can I talk to you? Both of them are very bright, in fact, incredibly bright. Both of them are incredibly ineffective as legislators. They don't know how to legislate. They don't know the rules and procedures of the system. The first thing is for a legislature to know how to work that system. Speaker Robin Voss is depending on people not paying attention or agreeing to having less debate or less amendments on the floor or less time to talk in front of the cameras. So all of a sudden, the debate is limited to 2 minutes. Melissa Sargent cannot say hello in 2 minutes, right? It's gonna take longer to hear some people, and they have a right to speak. And there has been leadership in the past that has come to memorandums of agreement that have been very cleverly put together to limit the days in session, to limit what a public hearing can, the notice of a public hearing, to prevent you from even seeing the bill before you vote on it. These are all legislative things. That is where all of your groups can help by telling the person running for office or the legislator that agrees with you, listen up. You're not a social worker. You are a legislator. We want you to do that job. We love it that you march, right? But Robin Voss does not care. If 10 legislators go out and march, he loves it because they're not focused on what he's doing in the building. And that is the truth. So these are things that I have learned over a lifetime. Why study politics? You are expert in many fields, but not politics. It is not a dirty word. There are some dirty people involved in politics. It is also, as I started with my apology at the beginning, it is not a spectator sport. It can be really nasty. And people will go after you if you are successful. People will go after you if you are effective as a legislator. They will target you. So all of a sudden, this young woman, who's a congresswoman from New York City, is a target. And what is she really? She's bright, she's intelligent, she's out there. They have to make her an enemy because she's a threat. That's politics. And hopefully she will be smart enough. You are either a participant or a victim. And I'm afraid that a lot of our groups would become victims as opposed to participants. If you participate, you have tremendous power because most people choose to be part of that silent majority. In fact, on a lot of our causes, people are sometimes too tired or just, there's just too much of politics. I just need to sit at home. I need to take care of my family. I need to do my work. This is too much for me. I can't do another cause. And that's all part of it. Special interest. My first handout to you is a special interest. A community development financial institution is a special interest. And the statistics that they put there, you can look at these people. We need these people in our state. We need more of them. You're all members of a special interest group. If you do not tell lawmakers about your special interest, who will? So as we ended at the end of the park this afternoon, I said to the group, if you were not here today, no one would be here today. No one else would be doing this job. And yes, you had to get up, and yes, you had to put on a dress, and yes, you had to put on high heels or shoes or whatever. You had to get to the Capitol, you had to park in Madison. Our lunch wasn't spectacular, but the fact that they made an impact, and we had a very, very good day. How ideas become laws. This is, to me, the most fascinating part. The Capitol is 4 square blocks in downtown Madison. It is an arena of discussion and debate. That's where ideas happen. In my old district, there was a 16-year-old who contacted me. This is in the mid-70s. She had taken her driver's test in Oshkosh. She flunked her driver's test because she made a right turn at a red light. There was no traffic coming. So she called me up and she said, how could I flunk my test? There was nobody coming, there was nobody on the road. I turned right on a red light. You should be able to make a right turn on a red light if there's nobody coming. And I thought, well, let's see what we can do with that. So I took her and her mom and her dad and sat down and we wrote a proposal. And by gosh, about a year later, the DOT said, you know, that's going to save people idling their car. It can be used in certain intersections. So as we passed along Wisconsin, about 18 or 20 other states, and I now do it, and I know when you travel, those of you that travel, you're going to come in Utah, for example, you're going to say, can I make a right turn on the red light here? And that's how it works. And these are ideas that become laws. I think to know the basics of our state legislature is also very important. People get ideas for bills from constituents, from lobbies, from interest groups. They take these ideas to the legislative drafters and then they draft a bill. Al, if you don't mind, I'm going to sit for a second.
Sure.
About a week and a half ago, I work with people who are blind and visually impaired. And I'm walking out of the Capitol and I'm with a woman who is, she's a younger African-American woman. She's a size 1. I am not a size 1. And her cane is tapping in front of her. And for the first time in my life, I caught a white cane between the legs. And I did I'm an old karate guy, believe it or not, Dan would attest to that. I did a complete somersault on the steps of the Capitol. And this afternoon, I learned that maybe after an hour or so, I'm going to sit down. So if you want to, but I have a great story.
We bring you a chair.
That would be great. That's perfect. Yeah. If you don't mind, I apologize. Because I stood plenty today already. Thank you. That's great. This is okay. I want to tell you a real true story that Nate, Tim, and others in southwestern Wisconsin would appreciate. It used to be that margarine was illegal in the state of Wisconsin. Absolutely true. I knew the 2 senators who were involved in this particular issue. The senator from Milwaukee's name was Kazimierz Tenziorski. He was 4'11". He had Coke bottom glasses, real thick old glasses. He spoke broken English. I am sure that when he came to the United States, it was maybe not legally. I don't think he spoke English. But the South Side, which was back then very Polish, elected him. He goes to church on Sunday at this beautiful basilica that's on the south side of Milwaukee that still exists, and it's quite lovely to see. And he walks out of the church, and there are 16 cars and station wagons with Illinois plates that have driven up to sell margarine in Wisconsin because it was illegal to have a margarine product for sale. What you could buy, for those of you old enough to remember, you could buy what looked like a pound of lard that had a little yellow dot in the middle so that you squeeze the dot to make your margarine look like margarine. That was legal. Kazimierz Kandziorski got up on the Senate floor and had the courage to introduce a bill that made margarine legal in the state of Wisconsin. It was in the statutes. The senator from the 17th district from Darlington, Wisconsin was Gordon Roslip. There were 90-some butter companies in the state, and several were in southwestern Wisconsin. He was the king of butter. He was also the president of the American Legion. He was a tavern owner, big booming voice, a big guy, made me look anorexic. I mean, he really did. And big guy, and he was Mr. Butter. So Kandziorski watched this debate, and at one point Roosevelt got up and said, any fool can tell the difference between butter and margarine. And in the floor of the Senate, there's a round table where you used to make the motion to lay the bill on the table. They would actually lay the bill on the table until they took it off the table. So the actual table is in the state Senate that did this. Well, Kandziorski challenged Roosevelt to a taste test. They went across the street to the Park Hotel. They got butter and they got margarine, however, had it illegally, and they blindfolded Roosevelt and for this very famous taste test. And so Roosevelt tasted both of them, and of course he said, "This is butter," and of course he was pointing to margarine. And the Senate was in an uproar. They took a recess for a while. They went across the street to drink, and they scarcely they did, and they came back, and they thought, well, if this stuff's going to be legal in Wisconsin, then we have to tax it. And so they came up with a plan to put a small tax on margarine, which goes to what's called the oleomargarine building at UW here down by the Department of Ag in Madison. Actually built a building with the money they got. I had always wondered, and I used to, when I tell this story, I would pull a knife out of my pocket and I'd say, I wonder what the penalty was for margarine paraphernalia. You know, how did they deal with that? If you had something with margarine on it. But that's an example of the debate that used to take place that was based on some fun, a little bit of merits. We have to find ways, whether they want us to or not, and they don't want us to bring that spirit back into this debate. And a little sense of humor, a little sense of real commitment to issues, and to not give up. And so today, again, back to the community development financial institutions. So today we invited staff in to come and tell us how their offices, we had 4 key staff from 4 Republican offices, conservative Republican offices. I invited them in, said, tell these people in the audience how they can best deal with your office. And it was incredibly great hour that we spent, and we should do that here. That would be a good program. So the first thing is obviously to be prepared. And you've got the sheet here. I'll go through this real quick. Is how ideas become a law. The next page, sorry. Obviously, I think most of you are familiar with the process of how the committees work. Again, for legislators that you know that believe in your causes or candidates, really get them to understand that where we're losing is in that process, right? So Pete Buttigieg came up with this proposal to have a Supreme Court that may have more. Well, Mitch McConnell did that a year ago. He decided a year ago that the Supreme Court would only have 8, didn't he? Right? He refused to even have a hearing on one person. You have to find that senator or that person to make that horrible policy to really make them pay a price on that. It has to be done in the legislature. Senator Fred Risser, who's still very active, will be 92 on May 5th. Back in the 70s, Fred Risser was the king of tying the Senate up in procedural motions when Republicans were trying to do everything. He would get up and object, he would refer, he would fight, and we need to encourage our younger people to know that process, an effective member of a school board can be quite good on a school board, right? If that school board member is not paying attention, but is just maybe listening to the Montessori people and not really doing the budget work or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You don't count on her or him to help you. Your power comes in giving strength to those men and women who are planning to run or who will run to really defend the issues that you care about. I want to go through the do's and don'ts of dealing with your legislator. So these are things that before you go meet with them that you need to do. Read their biographies, identify people that you both know. If Susan DeVos and I are going into an office and I happen to know her brother, I'm going to say I'm a friend of Susan's brother who's in your district and Susan's with me. Or I knew Dan Fields when he did this, or Ro Parker, or whoever. Get to know their staffs. My very first day on lobby, when I actually started to go into offices, I went in with a gentleman who we were working on a bill about the caboose at the Oscar Mayer plant. There was a law that said that Oscar Mayer had to have a caboose on the train that ran through one end of their plant to the other. It was a very expensive proposal. They didn't have to even have people in the caboose, but they had to have a caboose at the end of a train bringing the animals in or out or any of the equipment. And it said that you had to have it on if it was less than 3 miles. So their yard was about 1.5 miles. So they had to put a caboose on and take a caboose off. Obviously, you don't have to do that anymore. We walked into Fred Risser's office, and at the time, Senator Risser was one of the first political people to have an all-female staff. He had 3 young women at the desks. They were affectionately called the Risserettes, just sort of like, seriously. And I walk in with this gentleman who's much, much older, different generation, and he's looking at all 3 people in the office, and he says, who's here today? He was saying, where's the guy I can go talk to in the office about this damn bill? And I looked at the faces of those 3 women, and I said, we are doomed. There's no way they're going to listen to us. And I was right. You have to understand the role that staff play in an office. Oftentimes, Susan and I have worked with legislators who are very anti-transit. But we know the staff person gets on a Madison Metro bus and goes out to Monona where they live, or parks their car 2 miles away and they go to a parking ride. So get to know legislators who are leaders in fighting for your special interests. My youngest son, Evan, is very involved in corrections, in expungement. He learned that through people in his district, and they didn't seek him out. There was so little need to do this that he had to go recruit people to come in and talk to him. And people felt they couldn't make a difference. Make your legislators your friends. The cardinal rule in politics is loyalty. It really is. If you are perceived as a loyal friend, your actions and words will impact on legislators. Not money, loyalty. Not loyalty that, I mean, you can't disagree with them, but loyalty with a friend is, if Julie and I have a big argument, maybe we won't want to do it in front of the whole family. Maybe I can respect her enough to have our argument and come to some agreement. And we need to learn how to be smarter for the sake of the issues on some of that. And whether you're conservative or moderate or liberal, doesn't mean you give up you have to figure out a way how to get better, how to make it better. Involve legislators in your business. This is a very important point. Invite them to your office or property. Invite them to events like open house. So if I was running Grassroots Festival, I would invite all the legislators to come and meet Tim and talk about building lawn signs or whatever. Make sure they understand your business and your concerns. Politicians love crowds. Do involve your legislators in your community. Invite them to church, social, civic events. Invite them to high visibility events where they may meet people. Definitely invite them to your meetings, your association meeting. Definitely invite them to speak at your association meetings. When I invited the 4 staff of these 4 conservative offices today, I invited them to speak about an experience in their office where somebody really lobbied them poorly. And obviously screaming on the phone, nastiness ranks at the top. Second was people that would call them up and talk an hour and a half on the phone. Every legislative office, we all know people that will do that. If you're a legislative staff person, you have to sort of kind of just go with it, because if you hang up on it, there could be a letter to the editor saying, Senator Rainham just wouldn't listen to me. That you need to really learn how to develop your message and control that a little bit. How to contact your legislator, meet them in their district or at the Capitol, that's the very best way. Contact them by phone. Number 3 is to write a personal letter. Number 4 is to send them an email. Number 5 is to send them a form letter. One of the staff today, his name is Bill Savage, works for Representative Janelle Branchen, very conservative Republican from Menominee Falls, very conservative. He has a doctor that calls the office, a regular doctor, on a regular basis, and it's one of those hour conversations. Yep, I'm with you. Yep. Hate immigration, we're with you. We just hate the refugees. Yep, I'm with you. And he has the greatest experience. He gets a massive email from a website where you click on, if you agree with President Obama, click here. So it's about, so he gets this email, and the doctor's name is on this list, and it's a list for having waiters get more money and tips that he must have clicked on somewhere. So Dr. So-and-so's name appears on this list. He's not a waiter, he doesn't do tips. So sometimes groups will use your names in these massive things that legislators get. If you ever can look at one of those, you find it very interesting. How do you think they treat that? How do you think how effective is that? And it's that personal contact where you make a one-on-one call, then to have 40 or 50 or 150 names come in. So when you work with people, if they're asking you to do those kind of things, encourage them to personalize it a little bit so that it matters. Yes, sure.
Or do you want questions at the end?
Oh, no, let's go. Let's have a discussion.
I'm really interested in how, I've written letters and emails, and I understand that calling is better, but I'm wondering, what advice do you have for a phone call? I always feel like maybe I should be prepared so I hit all my points in a timely, and not do the hour phone call. But what kind of more specific advice can you give us about phone calls?
So what I would do first of all is on the legislative website, I would find out who the staff are in the office. So when you go to the senator's name, let's play with Janice Freehand for a while, former mayor of Evansville. So if you click on her site, and there's a section that says details. It says details. And if you click on that, it will list her staff. It will list their full name and their email address. And I'd say, all right, so she's got a staff of 3 people. First of all, who are you talking to? And so they pick up the phone and they'll say, good morning, this is Senator Janice Freehand's office. May I help you? Are you Lisa or are you Bill? You've got 2 or 3 choices. You could kind of find out who you're talking to and then write that name down. And after that phone call, if you're inviting them to an event, or if you say, I am a member of the Farmers Union and our organization, I really wanted to talk to Janice. Would you please pass on this message to her? And thank you, Linda, for talking to me. I appreciate it very much. Engage them, pretend you're the salesman. How would you want a salesman to talk to you? I'll share this with you. The other day I had the constituent services person for Governor Evers talk to a group of landlords about how calls are monitored into the governor's office. And I found out a lot of information. First of all, there are 6 phone lines. Secondly, that the staff are now required, Walker never did any of this, just thrown out. They are now required to put down what that person called about. And at the end of the day, they average about 140 calls a day. That's not bad, even these times. They average about 140 calls, and they have every 2 days a staff meeting to delineate which of those calls would go forward. So if I'm calling about expanding Medicare for all, Medicaid for all, Medicare for all, I am then going to make sure that that person who's handling that issue knows that. It's the best system I have ever seen in an office that is not, they're not flashy about what they're doing, but they are responding that way with real information that gets in. So they have a staff of people that handle those phone calls. They are now given a class on how to deal with that person who calls up. They have a person, and so Walker would never allow this. If a homeless person walked into the Capitol and wanted to go see the governor, you did not get beyond that security. There's a little fence they have there. You did not get beyond that. Today, that person can go in and sit down and talk to a staff person. Even if that person is not well, they are going to be welcomed into that office. When I was there this morning, an older black gentleman I've seen on the square many times was in the office talking to the staff person. Eventually, they will refer that person to another person to talk to, because you can't have, there are some issues the governor can't snap his fingers and take care of your issue at this time. I have seen that in also the offices of the agencies, that they are doing a much better job of saying, listen, record, refer. It's the first time I've ever seen that. Emails are fine, but that personal contact, if you're developing a longer-term strategy on this, let's say education, they have an education plan, then you really have to work on getting people, to develop a plan. Certainly, I'm very willing to talk to you about how to do that. So here's the other point on this page. So it's the middle of page 5. You contribute to your campaign, your family and friends, money, work in a campaign, endorsement of paper or literature. I am a huge believer in yard signs. I am a Mad Tim. Never enough for me. Like I said, I grew up in Oshkosh, International Fond du Lac was my district. I put lawn signs up every place I could find them. You know why? Because I was proud of that, and that was my territory. People that run the campaigns, and Mary Burks in particular was one, that was a real issue. I had PhDs in philosophy that had a place in Torrey County, and the woman would come back to Madison Scary. I was so depressed. I've only seen Walker signs. And I call the campaign manager, and he'd say, well, yard signs don't vote. And that's exactly what they say. And I said, well, you know what? They don't get put up by themselves, do they? That's my answer. They don't get put up by themselves. Somebody has to do that.
Well, and when you have a sign,
Yeah.
your neighbors are influenced if you have.
There's no question in my mind about it. I think it makes a difference of 1, 2, 3, or 4%. And it creates, it gives the confidence. I ran for Congress once in 1979, and my campaign manager knew how much I liked lawn signs and what effect they had. So I'm going into 2 Rivers, and they went ahead of me about 2 or 3 hours, and they went to people's houses and said, just put up this Goiki sign for just a while, and we'll come back and take it down. So I go into Two Rivers, I'm going down Waldo Boulevard into Manitowoc, and I thought, damn, let's go, let's win this battle. And of course, they took them down, the people probably, but it encourages the candidate. I'm not saying that, that's a little silly, but the other thing that I have found is, those of you that are following what Trump is doing, is a massive influence into social media that is either, it's there to divide, it's there to create controversy. My son's district is an African-American district in Milwaukee. What we saw during the Trump campaign was horrible stuff. Facebook is free, so there are a lot of people that use it to communicate. And they put everything on, they don't know, and really a lot of people don't know that if you write and say, I hate my sister, the whole world knows that you hate your sister. Or you use Clorox bleach, or you drive this car, or you hate the Packers. They all know. And so I don't know the answer to that, but this election is going to have to be more social media messaging as well. But I want to go back to this to represent your group to the legislators. Understand the official positions of your group. So today, before we visited any office, we briefed the group on what has been a collective, collaborative message, right? So Susan is not going to go in and 4 people are going to say, we love RTAs. And the 5th one says, but I don't, I'm not going to then let that person go on their own. If you're going to spend the effort, have some kind of a coordinated message that you all agree on before you go into that building. The farm groups are beginning to do this far more effectively. Farmers are incredibly independent. And one that has corn is going to yell at the one that's got soybeans. And they are finally learning that if they don't do something collectively, there's going to be none left. Bring your legislators' concerns and positions back to the group, the leadership, and to your lobbyists. So if I'm there today and this lady pulls me aside and she says, well, Gary, I never thought of this, but my first cousin is a legislator. Yeah, that matters. We should know that. Make sure you visit her office so they don't think of those things. Be realistic, be friendly, be reasonable, fight issues, not people, be discreet. I have seen many examples where, let's say Julie and I go in an office and we're talking about Janice Ringham, and we would say, well, her brother was drunk again. And people use these things. Stick to your issues when you go in to speak to a legislator. Our organizations, I spoke to the group up in Wapaka not too long ago, our Revolution group, and had breakfast with a few of them. There are issues, there are people in every organization that are not necessarily perfect. They are there. But try to work with them and make them understand that when it comes to that, please pay attention a little bit more and come to some consensus. Do not burn your bridges with legislators when they disagree. This is very hard. Not everybody can do these things, right? Some people are going to be angry and they can make lawn signs, right? Or they can do something. Pick the people that are effective if you're going to really be in the building to do this. I am finding within the Republicans, within the conservatives, that they don't know how to get out of the mess they're in. They are in a mess. They are afraid. The discipline is brutal. Their reputations are at stake. There's a whole different ethic there. Imagine being elected and then you get to the building and they say, you cannot introduce a bill unless I say it's okay. How long would each of you live under those circumstances? There'd be a revolution, right? Or in this group, 4 minutes. Because you believe you believe in it. So my advice to these younger legislators is become an expert in this building, or please find something else that you like to do. And if you can't find a job that pays $49,500 a year, don't hang on too long if you're not doing anything. there are too many people in the Democratic caucus who are not doing the work. There are people in the Republican caucus, they don't necessarily want them to work. But I've been to hearings where I see there's four, let's say four progressives on the committee, one shows up. I'm on the phone and I call that office and I say, just so you know, your boss isn't here and they're talking about her bill. The Republicans love that. They love the fact if you're discouraged to not pay attention. Caught them at the right time for an issue. I heard a story today. Legislator has 3 children. Legislator needs diapers. Legislator goes to the Growth of Woodman's that's open until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Person in Woodman sees the legislator and was told by the group, right, you gotta go talk to that person. You have to make that contact. Person says, this is easy. There he is, buying diapers, I don't know. I'm gonna go and bug him at that hour of the night. Best to go up and say, here's my card. I'm gonna give your office a call. Good luck. You need extra help, you need help with getting the diapers, I have a coupon here, take whatever you want to do. But whenever you go places, it's very difficult. You don't want to be rude. Give that person a little space and make the contact separately if your group really sets to contact that person.
Mary?
Yes,
I'm seeing you got a lot of information.
oh,
which is-
I'm sorry.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're gonna get through all of it. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, what you can say to us that would be the most important things. What do we need to walk away with that, you don't want, you want to make sure you don't.
Right. So if you go to page 6, and I can stop it there, because there's a couple of points here. Do remember you represent your group and your issue. The issue is important, not the political party. Make the issue as nonpartisan as possible. If we're talking social justice, criminal justice reform, voting rights, reapportionment, whatever, those issues really, you can say, this is a nonpartisan issue. You make it that way. Build support from both parties if that's possible. Support the legislators that support your interests. Prepare written testimony that what Al and I talked about when we met. Prepare written testimony for your members. Be brief, be to the point, address the issues directly. In Janesville, in these various communities, I'm sorry because I didn't even look at my watch, it went too fast. That you want to maybe consider organizing your testimony so that every person doesn't repeat the same thing. That's a problem in these bigger hearings that everybody gets up and you got 2 minutes, you say the same thing. We have to have a different viewpoint, and that will stick with the people. So maybe on the last, don't let your behavior defeat your issue. These are the don'ts. I have had people that will go up to, let's say Janice, Senator Bingham. They don't really know her. They'll say, "Hi, Janice, how are you?" Right? They don't pretend that you're more familiar with them. And if that person says, if you say Senator Bingham, and she says to Julie, "You can call me Janice," then call her Janice. But I think it's important to respect a little bit of their position and what they do. Don't call names, make accusations, denigrate, pile on lengthy data, fake an answer. I've seen a lot of people that have done that where they have no idea, but they're not going to let you know they don't know what they're talking about. So you can read these. Don't cry wolf. Never forget to say thank you. So at the end of the day at the park, we did a thank you reception. So there are people for many of your groups here tonight that have taken on your causes, that have either introduced bills or supported them or spoken about them. Those are people you need to thank and make sure they stay on your side. I apologize for going over a little bit of time. You can read the form coalitions. I like the fact that you're all together to talk about things that warms my heart. Achieve consensus, make it easy for legislators to support you by presenting a unified front. So I'll take more questions if you want. if that-
Yeah,
if
there's
that-
definitely time for
Sure.
the Q and A. I wanted to make sure that we did have time for Q&A.
Sure. Yes,
You alluded to the Republicans being under a despot or two despots.
right. Yeah.
So I'm thinking about issues that should be made nonpartisan, like money in politics. There's been a bill for Hanson Taylor, Hanson Subeck.
Yeah.
They won't let it out of committee.
Right.
There are some Republicans who might be sympathetic. But when you're dealing with a party, there's no way to lobby them.
Here's a
Let me give you
suggestion.
one,
Yeah.
I'll give you a very good example.
Yeah.
So in Sheila Harsdorf's district, they passed one of the United to Amend referenda.
Right. Big time.
They went down to see her with I gather, a large number of people. I don't think, they knew don't send two people. And she just said, essentially, I don't care. So, just being nice to them doesn't, not going to move them.
So each situation is a little bit different. And I'll tell you a bit of advice that I'm happy to have been part of with Governor Evers. So this year, the 4 Joint Finance Committee hearings are being held. So it's Janesville, River Falls, Oak Creek, and Green Bay. Nothing in the middle of the state. No Madison, nothing. No media markets on any of those places, Green Bay being the exception, but the Republicans are in. So they don't want, they really didn't expect 350 people to show up in River Falls, right? So what the Evers team is doing is they're doing their own hearings on the budget as well. So yesterday, after the River Falls hearing, the governor went to Superior and held another budget hearing, and today in Chippewa Falls. So he held 3 hearings. The Joint Finance Committee did 1, he did 2, Superior and Chippewa Falls. In the case of Sheila Harsdorf or those bills, set up your own public hearing. Just get a space, this library room, and say, today, as a senator, I'm going to hold a public hearing on the failure of Sheila Harsdorf to listen to the constituents in her district. And you can put a little hardness to it, you can put a little ice to it, but put her on the spot, but in a nice way. Not a nice way, but let her know that better pay attention. But do it in a legal kind of a format in which you're following the process. So these votes didn't have a public hearing, right? So let's review the votes in the 10th Senate District in these counties. How did the city of Hudson vote? How did Menominee vote? How did the town of Lincoln vote? And just make it into your own show and then live stream it and say, this is our response to Senator Harsdorf's, without calling her any names, but just to show the embarrassment and the hypocrisy of not listening to the people in her district. And she's out of there now. She's nothing. She's gone. And she was afraid to really stand up for what she knew was right. So Danny knew her as well as all of us knew her. And she wasn't the same person that she started. She became less and less independent this time around. Yes.
Yeah, I've been involved in a couple of advocacy days where I've learned quite a bit from going to the Capitol. And one thing that we were told is don't necessarily expect to see your legislator and be willing to talk to their aide or their staff. And in these cases, that was the case. And I found that them to be very knowledgeable on the topics of their emphasis and very attentive. So it wasn't like we didn't get to meet with the senator or the assembly person.
And having been there, I can tell you that the meetings with the legislators are often more inconclusive than the meetings with the staff. So what we did today, I invited 4 very conservative offices, all Republican offices. I invited the staff, I did not invite the legislator. So one of the staff guy goes to Scott Krug, who's from Wisconsin Rapids, and said, no, Gary didn't want you to come, is it okay if I go speak to them? So Krug sends me a text this afternoon and says, so I'm not good enough, and I wrote back, I said, no, you're not, you're not. You can get into that office through that staff person. And I use transit as an example, and we found that very effective, is that some of the staff will be more helpful. When the votes come out, they can't really maneuver around very much. But I am really keen on working with the staff, very much so, and developing those relationships.
Where do you stand on letters to the editor kind of thing? In this case,
Yeah.
I'm not talking about a negative, I'm talking
Yeah.
about a positive.
Yeah.
I was impressed with the article I read about Evers drawing the line in the sand
Yep.
and saying, this is what 70% of the people want, and I will draw the line in the sand. And I wanted to write you immediately. I wrote to his office and I did a letter to the editor saying, I really appreciate what he's doing, because
Yeah.
you should almost always want to be behind where the people are at. I
Yeah.
like that you said that.
Yeah.
I like that you drew a line. And I'm
I love it.
behind
Yeah,
this.
I love it. Letters to the editor. Now I would go one step further.
Mhm.
So let's say I am Julie's friend and I live in the same community. I would then take her letter to the editor and I put a little sentence or two above it saying, I just read this great letter from your district from this woman, Julie, I don't know who, but I'm just sending it to you in case you didn't see it. So then two people have done the same thing. You're not writing another letter. You're saying, I think you should be nice if you saw this letter.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And if two or three people do that,
I mean, I would think the carrot is just as valid, in getting what you would like to see happen and letting them know, like you said, that if they don't hear from you, goes, well, I'm behind them, They don't know it though.
they don't know it. Yeah. Yes.
So, one of the things we want to focus on is fair maps. What do you think we could do to work on fair maps?
So how far back in history do you go on fair maps? So there are stories that could be told about the maps that were done in the 60s or the 70s or how they were. I would bring in the history to show that it doesn't have to be this way. And you can subtly make the point that the legislators should not pick their voters, the voters should pick their legislators. So in my own experience in 1982, the legislature failed to pass a map. So we were running in districts that were the old districts. A judge came in and changed the district after we filed nomination papers. So I was a candidate for the state senate. After the deadline to file papers, the ballot was set. A federal judge came in and created a new district, kept the old, the time. So I had a different district, which I was no longer lived in, and I was out, basically. After the legislature was elected and reconvened, they created a third district. So the 19th district had 3 different Senate districts in the course of 7 months in 1982 and 83. So that was a federal judge. And the legislature reacted. So I would do stories about what the impact was, about communities of interest, about the horrible nature of the surgery that they did in cutting up, creating districts that were parts of 5 counties, right? I mean, it was artwork. It was total artwork. They got every penny that they paid for illegally. I mean, they had a plan, didn't they?
To follow up on that,
Yeah.
so you talked about focusing on the legislators who are going to do the work. Who are the current legislators who you think we should focus on, who are ready to actually do the work on that?
It's not necessarily by age. There are some that are a touch older that need to get kind of woken up a little bit. That could be a little bit bolder. I think there are some surprising ones that nobody really looks at. And many of them are, we could go through and do a list of those people.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
asking for, yes.
Right. So the guy up in Green Bay, Stosh Krasinski, is a new legislator. He has a lot of influence. I mean, he worked for the League of Conservation Voters. He is high energy. He is pleasant. He is funny. Robin Voss cut down offices, just as an aside, but a kind of a fun thing. So Voss hired 8 more staff for himself this year, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he combined some of the new Democrats into offices, and Stosh is a hunter. So he had up all his deer heads, and he's sharing the office with a new legislator from Wauwatosa, who absolutely cannot be in the room with a stuffed animal of any kind. So they had to move, because she could not be looking at dead deer hanging on his wall. But he is an infectious personality. Find people that are going to be the leader and encourage them along the way. It will take some time, but certainly he would be one of them. I mourn the loss of Mandy Wright in Wausau. I'm sad of some of the legislators that came so close in this election that would have been leaders in this. And I'm hopeful that 2020, you have to develop. So if your groups got together and developed who your top 5 people are, you can make a difference in this election. Not 99, but take 5, take 4, do 3, and make those people the creator of your cause. I've seen it work. I've done it myself. So I think that's a very good way. You have a lot of talent, energy. You're intelligent. You're thoughtful. You read. You listen to public radio. You do all those things. And it's finding that right connection to get you in the building. I've learned that the Farmers Union is doing a very good job last year and this year. They are responding to the needs. Their membership is growing. The Farm Bureau membership is declining. And that's a big change. And they have a plan. And I don't know how you could develop, if any of you do strategic planning, how to groups like the Oregon group or her group, the 17th district, whatever, how you can coordinate. That would be a very good thing.
So I'll just ask, is there anything that we want to do in the next month or so? I think we should visit a legislator. I don't know who or exactly what about, maybe through maps. Does anybody have any ideas they want to put forward?
So you want to look at the issue of reapportionment and the court date that's coming up, and how to make it better. You want that issue to be front and center yet. You want to bring that forward.
And then funding for the Legislative Reference Bureau.
To do the reapportionment.
Yeah.
I love it. Do you have anybody that you could go to draft a bill? Have you talked to anybody about bill? That's mentioned in this. Again, I'm sorry, it took longer to go through it than I thought it would.
No idea. I don't know if anybody is already working on that. If Jay Heck maybe already has something written out.
No, I think you could go right to the building and go right into one of the offices, and I'll make a suggestion. Somebody you don't know. There's a new legislator by the name of Robin Vining, Vining. Her district is 5 precincts of Milwaukee, half of Wauwatosa, and half of Brookfield. She is the only Assembly Democrat to have won a Republican seat in the last election. She won by 135 votes. She beat one of, and I can honestly say this, you can check the recordings off, Al, one of the nastiest people I've ever dealt with in politics, who was our past state treasurer, Matt Adamczyk, who tried to destroy the office. I don't even want to go tell you all of the issues that involved, but she beat him. She has a staff person by the name of Maddie Pelzowitz, M-A-D-D-I-E, Pelzowitz. Maddie's father ran against Jim Sensenbrenner for Congress in the last election and did over 43% of the vote in that district. She is bright enough, and they have the authority, if they give you permission, that legislative office has the authority to let you go to the Legislative Reference Bureau to draft a bill. You don't need to go through Common Cause, you don't need to go, do it yourselves, form a little committee, see if she will give you the ability to go to drafting, and then actually go through the process of drafting your own bill for these collective groups. It comes out of you, comes out of your grassroots. And that is, so first of all, if the Legislative Reference Bureau allows you, if the legislator says you do not need to hire an attorney to draft the bill, they will work with you to draft the bill. And they are very, very good. And load it up, make it an omnibus bill, and let people know that you have a countervailing bill draft. Keep it in the building, focused on the law, on the legislature, on the process, on a bill number as your cause. That will bring you right up in front. So when I lobbied, I handed out this, the group I lobbied with on these handouts is called Invest in Wisconsin. So when I registered for them, there are 700 entities in the state. I have to record how much time I spent with them. You can also get registered as an entity, as a lobbying entity, even if you're volunteers. There's a small fee, there's a fee that pays for that, but then every group that's registered is in that network. So if you add an amendment, they know about it. It's a very good system to make an impact in the world of thinkers, that are involved in that, and it's a small world. But I think you are, based on what I've observed tonight, what I know, I don't know if several of you have worked on this, Dan, even if you've done bill drafts in the past and your own capability, right? I mean, I think that could work.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah. So about 4 o'clock today, somebody asked me what I missed most about the legislature, and I said it was the applause.
I want to make a couple of comments quickly too. One of the reasons we work with Gary in particular, I think you should have observed out of his time here how much he knows about these people, how much he knows their names, their families. It's more than just getting on the phone and saying, "Hi, my name's Al, and I don't like you." But learning about people. The other thing which I preach constantly is any discussion that starts out with you saying something negative about or to the other person is over. We all need to put some of that in our back pocket. We all have passion. We all kind of think some people are not that great, but you need to put that in your back pocket. And if you can't, get somebody else to present the case like Gary is suggesting. Because once you kind of blast somebody, they're not going to hear another word you say. We did the JFC, and several of the talks started out with what was wrong with the committee. And it was like, no, don't say that. Tell them why you're here and what you want. Whether you like them or not, doesn't really matter, to be honest with you. But as soon as you say that, whatever comes after that will not be heard. So thank you.